Hey everyone, what's going on? It is Brian. Yes, we are back. And we have an exciting sample to get into. This is not only a first impressions review, this is a preview sample that we have from Blue Run for their upcoming fall batch release. The other unique thing about it, this is not a bourbon like we've seen the last couple of releases. No, this is their Golden Rye coming in at 95 proof. Now, I've not seen a press release go out about this, so there's not a lot that we know about it. However, I was sent over a fact sheet. I'm going to go over through some of those stats real quick for you all, and then we're going to dive right into the sample. So for the product notes, it says Blue Run Small Batch Straight Golden Rye Whiskey is Blue Run's inaugural rye expression, named for both the distinct color of the choice grains that were used in the creation process and the resulting golden-hued whiskey. Blue Run Golden Rye Straight Whiskey was awarded a gold medal at the 2021 San Francisco World Spirits Competition. I'm not going to get into the tasting notes. We want to dive right in without looking at that. It looks like it is an undisclosed Kentucky distillery, an undisclosed mash bill and yeast. It's from 92 barrels. The sample says that it's 95 proof, and it's coming in at a $99.99 SRP. Let's go ahead and dive right into this sample. If you guys don't mind, take a pause now, subscribe, like, leave a comment, and let me know if you're enjoying the content. I love doing these videos for you guys, but I'd love to know if I'm hitting on the things that you all want to hear me talk about. Now, the nose is really intriguing right away, and at the time of this recording, most specifically because it reminds me of the sweetness that you get on some of the Middle West spirits that I've been able to sample so far. So we just got back for entry proof of doing a Middle West spirits pick. And one of the things I noticed about the 4-grain bourbons that we tried is that the nose had a lot of caramel or a lot of brown sugar or a lot of toffee sweetness on the nose. It was very saturated, it was very intense, and it was very alluring and soaked with flavor. This nose is no different. Without having the sample pulled up next to me, I feel like that kind of reminds me of maybe the Pikesville rye in that sort of way. Like the rye doesn't lead me to believe that it's a rye. It leads me to believe that it is a bourbon whiskey, something that has a lot of corn in it because of how sweet it is. On the nose, it comes off as if it's going to be really chewy on the palate. There's a lot of honey. There's some graham cracker sweetness. There's some brown sugar and vanilla. There's like a floral bouquet to it that almost immediately makes me think of the Nashville Barrel Company rye that we'd had also. It does linger with some spice and some oak, but the oak is soft, and if anything, it's more like some wood presence. And then the spices would be maybe pulling out as nutmeg and cinnamon, but not exactly baking spices. It has this kind of deep, sweet, saturated spice that is sugar coated. So a lot of very big sweetness that is very enticing. Let's go ahead and go into the palate. Now for 95 proof, it not only starts with like a burst of juiciness, but it kind of has a buttery mouthfeel. This is another one that just kind of makes me think back a little bit to the pinhook video that we talked about. And I say that because there's this undeniable peach flavor that just pops as you're tasting this. A little bit of melon, a little bit of peach, but there's definitely some really nice, ripe, enjoyable fruits that jump out of the glass right away, which again, as I mentioned with the Nashville Barrel Company, is a little bit unique to find in a rye. Now, where I feel like this differs from the Nashville Barrel Company, that one was a little bit thin, even though it was 100 proof. And while this is 95 proof, there's something about it, maybe those brown sugars and growing into caramel, that just kind of sits on the palate in a very saturated and slightly weighty, or at least creamy sort of way. Yeah, buttery richness, waves of brown sugar, peach, rye bread, vanilla, and as you move it around on the palate, it just keeps lingering with more caramel. Let's just quickly transfer over to the Nashville Barrel Company. This is the batch 2 of their small batch rye. Yeah, totally different. That's like juicy fruit, big explosion, lots of ripe fruit, but very fruity without the sugary sweetness tones. I'm even kind of looking over here at my other ryes, and I don't even know what I would lean towards. I have a Sazerac rye, which comes off like candied citrus. We've got the New Riff rye that comes off a lot more minty and kind of bigger and spicier in that way. We've got the Stellum rye that we've talked about a couple of times, which is very much of a rye drinker's rye and has a lot of complexity, so very different animals to talk about. We've got some Willet ryes that seem to hit on like the wintergreen or the spearmint and like some bubblegum sweetness flavors, so that's kind of out of the picture. You got the Starlight ryes in there too, and they're a little bit more chocolatey, even though they do have some honey flavor too. Like our Double Oaked rye just has a lot more spice and other more traditional rye characteristics. Going back one more time to this blue run, I think I just can't get over this sort of fresh floral bouquet, caramel and brown sugar, and peachy sweetness that's in this rye. From kind of quickly looking around, I don't know that I've had another rye that kind of has all these things. I keep thinking back to Pikesville because I remember in the blind shootout video that I did, the part 1 of those, it seemed to have a lot more of the vanillas and caramels, but I also think I remember it having a little bit more traditional rye spice and heat as well. This one is not heat. And it even has a slight element of some of the slightly charred oak on the palate too, the more it sits. For 95 proof, I really enjoy the body. Some folks might find it a little light because you can tell it doesn't engulf the palate and really attack it. But what it does is it has a good buttery richness that I find incredibly drinkable. At a $99.99 SRP, that's going to be left up for you all to decide. From a drinkability standpoint, this is very high. I could see myself drinking a whole lot of this because it has that palate that sort of hits on a couple of rye notes, but for the most part, it drinks like a very silky, buttery bourbon whiskey. I think because it's a rye, you don't run into the young bourbon grain sort of notes. So that's seen as a positive. On the palate now, as it lingers a bit longer, you run into some purple fruits that kind of just sit on the tongue in a slightly fermented fruit sort of way. That's really intriguing as well. I don't think I'm going to run into an overwhelming amount of complexity with this pour. I think that might be a slight knock towards it. But you all know that I enjoy Blue Run. I think the tricky part about this is going to be, does the palate, which is unique on its own, match up with the $99.99 SRP that's going to be out there? That's going to be left up for you all to decide. For me, I really enjoy drinking this product, and it's nice to see a Blue Run product that's coming in a little cheaper than the bourbons that we've seen pretty well aged. In terms of where it stands for a rye, even though I really enjoyed this $65-ish Nashville Barrel Company, and I really do, it's got a lot of juicy fruit to it, this Blue Run is just a different experience. Like the Stellum is a different experience, like the New Riff or a Willet are a different experience. If you're into whiskey in general, and if you like the catalog of flavors that come from rye whiskey, but you also like bourbon whiskey, this is definitely going to be one that is going to be enjoyable for you because it has a lot of traits that you enjoy about bourbon, but does squeeze in some of these things that are unique for the rye category. You all, thanks so much for tuning in. Mike, thanks so much for letting me try this Blue Run Golden Rye. I look forward to seeing that roll out in retail, and I look forward to seeing if you all end up grabbing a bottle and what you all think of it. Guys, please don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment below and let me know what you think about the content. I love shooting content for you all and hope it's things that you all are interested in hearing about. Also, let me know if you all like hearing videos about these first impressions or pre-run samples. I don't have a lot of companies that are interested in sending those things to me, but I love getting that kind of information out for you all to let it know if that's something that you all want to buy, try at a bar, or if it's something that sounds like it would be interesting to your profile. If you all like the content and you want more, please follow along with the Entry Proof podcast. That's a podcast that I do with Drew P. Whiskey. He's also here on YouTube. You can find us on entryproofpodcast.com. distilled.com. And a lot of times we're over on his stream on Thursday nights doing lives, talking about whiskey, interviewing people, or just diving into craft whiskey tastings or a whole multitude of things. If you all like the content here or on Entry Proof, if you all want to get into some Entry Proof barrel picks that are done by me and Drew that I just mentioned, you can join us on Patreon, patreon.com/entryproofpodcast. That's where we open up first for our barrel picks, as well as giving a little bit of insider information. Thanks so much for tuning in, everybody. It's been a pleasure. Hope you have a great night. Until next time, we'll see you later.